Look, we need to talk. I've changed as a person. I just need new things. I need foveated rendering. I need HDR. I've met somebody else. Hello everybody, welcome to Rush Reality. My name is Sam, thank you so much for joining me. It is finally here, the PlayStation VR 2. I have been busy. If my hair looks bad, that's because I haven't taken this thing off since it arrived. I've been playing lots of games and today I want to give you my thoughts. Is it any good? Is it better than the Quest 2? Is it better than a high-end PCVR headset? And should you get it? Let's check it out. So, the first thing you notice when you unbox this thing is it's surprisingly light, almost disconcertingly light. But actually, once you get it on, you quite appreciate that and it makes it very comfortable to wear. It's got a classic Halo strap design. You can let out more of the strap at the back and there's a little button here that slides the faceplate in and out. So you can position it so the lenses are perfectly placed for your head shape. The rubber gasket used to block out the light is absolutely fantastic. It lets nothing in and it gives for a really immersive experience. So, what about the visuals? Well, I wasn't the first person to get their hands on this headset. And I have to say, I was disappointed when I saw some reviews before mine arrived and they said that the visuals were quite blurry. Now, since I've been able to use it, I want to reassure you that the visuals of this are very, very good. It's got an OLED display that gives you absolutely fantastic colours. It's a 4K picture and it's packing full HDR and things are looking very, very good. There is a slight screen door effect and that's possibly what some people are referring to with regards to the blurriness. That just comes from the OLED displays. We know about the pixel arrangement for OLED displays and the fact that they skip a pixel once every 3 pixels. But I have to say, you don't really notice that in use. It's only when you get one block of colour. So a completely black screen, a completely white screen, you stare and you might see that slight dotting around the place. But in general gameplay, you really don't. The other possibility that people could have been referring to is driven by the fact that it uses Fresnel lenses. Just like the Quest 2, that's that kind of ringed lens. So they come with a sweet spot in the middle. The outer edges have slightly less clarity than that of the middle. It also means that if you don't have it positioned correctly for your head, then you're not looking perfectly at that sweet spot. But thankfully Sony were thinking of that, and as soon as you launch the headset for the first time, it fires up the eye tracking setup, which helps you position it very, very well. You're given a little display on the screen that shows your eyes in comparison to the lenses and you can position them perfectly. It then guides you through a little thing where it tracks your eyes looking around at some things on the screen. The eye tracking really kicked things up a gear and I was really blown away by what it can do. It can tell perfectly where you're looking and it's able to do some very fancy tricks that we'll come to shortly. So the Sense controllers that come with it. Now, I'm really impressed by these. If you've come from something like an Oculus Touch controller, they're going to be very familiar to you. Very similar layout, and everything feels kind of at home. But I much prefer the position of this tracking ring. On the Oculus Touch controller, they tend to bang together when you're doing things like climbing or aiming a gun, but these things never get in the way. They feel really comfy and really balanced to hold. The buttons are all good, everything clicks kind of fine, they're capacitive so it knows if you're touching it and you can make different gestures with your fingers because of that. The joysticks are kind of smaller than what you'd get on something like a DualSense controller, but they do the job perfectly fine, and of course, it's got the adaptive triggers on the back. Adaptive triggers, just like on a DualSense controller, they can provide increasing resistance as you're trying to pull the trigger. Therefore, with the idea of creating some immersion by replicating the action you're performing in the game. Now, I'll be honest, lots of people have really praised this for the immersion it brings in games. It really isn't quite as big as people are making it out to be. The adverts show examples of people maybe pulling a bow and they're pulling this and it's really bringing resistance. But in reality, it feels nothing like that because all you're doing is holding the arrow with that and then the resistance is you moving your hand in the air. And there is none. So it's really not that much of a game changer. But for general use, these things are really good and really comfy. My only gripe is the battery life. Now, they last about 3 to 4 hours, and I've gone through these multiple times already, and many times they failed whilst I'm midway through a game. Really frustrating, because you've then got to charge up both of them. Now, I didn't order the charging dock that would charge them both at once, and I think that's something I'm going to have to look into, because it's quite frustrating that you need to try and source 2 USB-C cables to charge both of them at the same time if you want to quickly get back into a game. Another thing that I disagree with what most people have said about this headset is the haptics. So you've got built-in haptics in the headset and in the controllers, a little vibration that gives you a sense of what's going on around you. Now, lots of people have put this down as a bit of a gimmick, said it doesn't really add much to the experience. I completely disagree. I think games like Resident Evil, where you get to use a powerful shotgun or a sniper rifle, the fact that you can feel the shots ringing out through your hands and your head really make the thing feel so much more visceral. I think it's a massive upgrade. So next into the audio for the headset. So they provide with the headset these two little in-ear headphones. And you know what? They do the job. It's a nice little design. It mounts to the back of the headset and then pops into your ears, so it really doesn't leave much excess cable in the way, and it's a nice sleek design. Of course, there will be a temptation to pair them with a more powerful headset to really get the best audio experience you can. Now actually, I think PlayStation have been a bit sneaky here, because most headsets don't really fit over this Halo style band, except for their own proprietary Pulse headphones, which have that funny little shape. I've always thought that was an odd design. It's clearly because they knew what the design was going to be for the PSVR 2 well back at the time that the PlayStation 5 launched, so they created their accessories to match it perfectly, because that seems to fit on nicely over the top of this. I did still manage to use some other headsets. I enjoyed using my Sony WH-XM4s, really good quality headset, but it doesn't fit perfectly. This kind of blocks where they would naturally sit, and they're sitting kind of off your ears. So you lose the ability to have any sort of noise cancelling, and there is a drop off in sound quality where it isn't perfectly positioned for your ears. The biggest gripe I've heard other people talking about is the fact that it's still a wired headset. And if you've come from the Quest 2 using virtual desktop to play wirelessly from a PC, then you kind of get used to having a Wire 3 experience. But I'll be honest, this wire never really got in my way. It's nice and light and you don't really notice it. I play facing away from my console and away from the screen, really because I don't want to accidentally punch the screen, but it means that you've just got this trailed over your back, and as long as you keep facing in that general direction, it never really upsets you. I have already put in some lengthy sessions with this headset, and whilst I do think the Halo design is nice and comfy, I would say that after a couple of hours, this band does start to get a little bit tight and a little bit rough on your head. It's not very excessively padded. Maybe a higher quality soft foam would have gone down well. So what about the games and experiences that I've been spending my time in? Well, first off, Horizon Call of the Mountain. That felt like the landmark title, the one you really needed to get into first. And you know what? It's a good experience. Everything looks very crispy. The HDR visuals really shine on this game. And it feels like they're using this title in the same way that they used Astro's Playroom for the PS5 launch to really showcase what the hardware can do. The eye tracking is used to enable foveated rendering so that the scene is much easier to run. If you don't know what foveated rendering means, basically they're tracking exactly where you're looking, and they only render the real high clarity at the things you're looking at. Everything else is a slightly lower quality. But it refreshes so quickly that as soon as you've adjusted your eyes, you're already looking at a clear picture. It's done very, very smoothly. They also use the eye tracking for some interesting tricks during gameplay. They use it to assist your aim. First, when I started firing the bow and arrow, I was amazed at how good I was. I was like, I've played loads of bow and arrow VR games before and I'm never quite this good. Well, it turns out that the eye tracking is aiding you. They don't judge where your bullets fly based on just where you point your bow and arrow. They also look at what your eye's looking at as a guide for what your target should be, and it means that you always get your shots dead on exactly where you want them to be. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, they must just be locking you onto a target. But even when you pick something that is completely irrelevant to the game, your shots go exactly where you want them to. It's a very satisfying experience. Horizon Call of the Mountain though isn't quite the grand slam I thought it might be. It's nowhere near as open as a proper Horizon game. It's very linear, very on rails, and you follow a set path. The battles are kind of arena based. The machine sits in the middle and you're pacing around the outside, picking your shots and dodging. You do come against some opponents out in the field where you can kind of shoot from different points, but one-on-ones tend to play out like that. It's very climbing heavy, like very climbing heavy. They've taken some definite inspiration from the Climb 2, but it's done very well. So if you enjoy that kind of game, I think you will really like it. I do recommend you check it out, but go in knowing it's probably not going to be a full AAA quality title. The best experience I've had, without a doubt, is Gran Turismo 7. Gran Turismo 7 looks fantastic in the PSVR 2. This is without a doubt the way to play it. I've put in around 20 to 30 hours on Gran Turismo 7 before the headset arrived. And you know what? I now think that I hadn't actually played the game, because this is what it's really all about. The visuals look astounding. They've thought of every little detail. When you jump into a historic car, they've done the interior completely perfect. Jump into an old Mustang and you've got the sort of wood grain dash. Jump into an 80s Beamer and everything's got that kind of plastic, rubbery feel. They've done it fantastically well. The driving is slick, you really feel the speed, and it's just a really good experience. This is my favourite one so far. I'm going to be putting a lot of hours in. I also played Resident Evil Village. Now this game does feel like a VR port. It's very clear it was originally a flat game. There's lots of things that you just can't interact with, and often a video scene will play out around you and you'll see your kind of floating hands in it, but you feel very isolated from what's going on and it's not quite as immersive as it otherwise would have been. But once you get past that, it's a really good game. Very enjoyable and absolutely terrifying. Resident Evil games have always stressed me out to the max, and this thing takes it to another level. I will say though that it did seem to add a vignette that I couldn't take off whenever you're running, and I don't think that's necessary. There should always be comfort options that you can choose. Once you're a veteran VR player, you don't really need something like a vignette, and it does really take you out of the game. They need to pull this quickly and give the option to turn it down. And lastly, I tried out Star Wars Galaxy's Edge to compare it to how it was on the Quest 2, and I think the PSVR 2 is absolutely the way to play it. It adds in the little life upgrades that you get from the PSVR, so the better visuals. It's also got the DLC that came later on down the line with the Quest 2, and it uses the haptics and things are really, really good. In addition to trying out the VR games, I also enjoyed playing in cinematic mode. In cinematic mode, you can play any standard PS5 game on your headset, and it gives you the ability to play on an OLED screen with full HDR at 1080p running at 120Hz. Now that is absolutely the way to play PlayStation. You know, behind me I've got a 4K screen, console ready with HDMI 2.1 connection, perfect for the PlayStation, and I'd rather play on my headset. PS5 usually aims for about 30 FPS when running a game at 4K, so running it at 120Hz with all those features and the great OLED screen is so much better. But at the moment for VR games, there isn't actually a massive amount. There's a few big hitters, and I think about 40 or so titles in total, with a few more confirmed to come very shortly. But that soon runs dry, and lots of those are repeats of things we've already seen from the Quest 2. And once you get past the games, there really isn't much else to do. On something like Quest 2, you've got the games, but you've also got loads of entertainment options. You've got social apps, you've got media viewing, there's loads of ways to use your headset. Now at the moment on the PlayStation Store there's nothing else relevant to the PSVR 2. I'm hoping that'll change shortly and we'll see more things get released, and I'm hoping there'll be a few software updates that'll add a little bit more to the experience over the coming month. In fact, I'll be joining the PlayStation Beta program to jump onto any of that as early as I can. So how does this compare to the other headsets I've been using up to now? Well, compared to the Quest 2, I'd say it's fairly close for the visuals, but I think the games are better on the PlayStation VR 2, though admittedly a much smaller library of them. It is wired, but I don't really think the wire gets in the way, and the wire does actually remove a bit of compression that is necessary for a wireless connection. If I was speaking to somebody who's shopping at the moment and they already had a PlayStation 5, I'd say go with the PSVR 2 for the moment. How about in comparison to a PCVR headset? Well, compared to the HP Reverb G2, it definitely doesn't compete with the levels of clarity, but the experience is much smoother. And with the kind of quality of game that I've seen so far from PlayStation, I do think it's going to get quite a lot more use than my G2 does. And then comparing to a real high-end headset, something like the Vario Aero, I'd say, well, the visuals are never going to stack up. That really is aiming at a different kind of audience. But it still is a good experience, and definitely something you should consider. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I've really enjoyed my time with this headset so far, and I'm going to edit this video as quick as I can so I can put it back on my face. But what do you think? Are you considering a PSVR 2? Have you already got one? If so, let me know your thoughts. A like would be appreciated, and a sub would be absolutely fantastic. Love to see you next time. Goodbye.